My session. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Today I'm back with my designing a homeschooling curriculum session 2, and I welcome all of you to this session. And last session was indeed a beautiful one. There were so many things that I wanted to share in my last session, and there were so many things that I wanted to talk about. However, in the span of 1 hour, I could just give a bird's eye view, though I did cover the essential elements of designing a curriculum. Today, I thought we can get involved into a discussion, or I hope there are more viewers. I can see more and more people coming on board. I thought the best thing to discuss or to talk about would be what is a child and what is my notion of childhood. Out here, I would like to remind everybody that since we are into homeschooling and we shrug away from standardized ways of doing things, we uphold the belief that each one will have their own understanding and their own meaning of what is a child and who is a child and what is childhood. So let's begin. I do have a small presentation today also for the same. I'm going to start sharing it, and while I share the presentation with everybody, I don't see many people live as yet, so I'm not sure whether I should wait. I could wait a bit before we have a few people, at least 3 or 4, viewing this session. That way, it could be a little more interactive and not only me sharing and talking about something. So I could just wait. So while I'm waiting, maybe the two people whom I can see live on this session can maybe start just typing out what they believe is a child and what according to them is childhood. It will be great if you start typing out your current notions of childhood. What is childhood? Who is a child? If you start typing it out, I can try and make the session as interactive as possible. So, oh, we have about 9 people on our session now. So, just to reiterate what we're discussing, what I've just asked our viewers to do is type down in the comment section what according to them is childhood and who according to you is a child. So please start typing in while I get into sharing my presentation. Okay, I don't see any comments coming in, so probably it's something that I need to just begin. So, okay. So if we go to understand the popular notion of what childhood is, or who is a child, according to our law, childhood, is, in fact, there's a lot of confusion in our law too, because there is a lot of controversy of whether childhood is up to 18 years of age or whether it is up to 14 years of age, because the labor law says that once a child is 14 they can start working, whereas for other purposes we need the child to become 18 to be considered as an adult. So, generally for convenience sake, everybody looks at childhood as the age criteria as 0 to 18 years. And, when we think about who a child is, there are many, many, many aspects to it. And the child rights also has a perspective, and there are various child rights. I've already mentioned them on the screen. I'm not going into child rights right now because we are not looking into child rights. There is also a question that is often asked, and that is about whether childhood is a socially constructed phenomena, and whether it is whether it is constructed by society, or whether it actually is a different phase of life. And there is a lot of debate around it. There's a lot of thoughts around it. So, it's fine if every individual and every homeschooling parent also looks at it differently. So I don't want to get into that. I want to get into defining and looking at different notions of childhood. So I'm going to talk about how my notion of childhood developed. So when I was growing up, like I shared in my last session, and I the thought that would come about childhood to me is, and the thought that was propagated everywhere around me, was that childhood is basically, is a phase where the child has to focus on a lot of learning, and people have to teach the child the good, bad, right, wrong, apart from teaching them concepts of about the world around them. Childhood was also considered to be a phase where you prepare children for adulthood, right? In order to start living an independent life in during adulthood, the childhood was always looked at as a preparatory phase. But what is it for us? What is it for me? What is it for you? My session would have been much better if I had comments flowing in. I don't seem to have them right now, so I have to talk about my understanding itself. So, nevertheless, the first notion of childhood that I would like to bring to everyone's notice and bring to everyone's understanding is just a minute. I need to shift this. Okay, there is something called the romantic notion. Now, what do you think? What do you understand by the romantic notion of childhood? And we're going to look at it, and we are also, while we are going to look at the romantic notion of childhood, we are also going to look at how, if we have this notion of childhood, how does it influence how is it going to influence the way we deliver our curriculum, or the way we design our curriculum and the activities around what we want to teach a child. So, a romantic notion, just as the word romantic says, it's all about romance, about looking at the world in a very beautiful way, seeing the flowers and the beauty around everything. Similarly, the romantic notion says that, believes that children are beautiful beings, they are innocent, to a great extent, they are clean slates, which have to be filled in. And so, in the romantic notion, uh, basically, the focus is on nurturing the growth of children, providing them with care, protection, love, everything in a beautiful way. So it's a very romantic thought, as just similar to what one feels when one is in love. So that's the same thought that is taken forward to children, and that's how childhood is looked act. So there would so parents believe that children need to be lovingly taught, and there is a lot more focus on positive reinforcement in terms of praise, appreciation, in terms of providing rewards and so on to a great extent, and making the child feel special all the time. So that's what the romantic notion of childhood is. And to be honest, many of us homeschoolers share this view of childhood and who a child is. And why do I say this? I say this because we do not want our children to face the harsh world, the school world, where they are thrown into competition. They have to deal with 40, 45 children in a classroom. We believe that no, their learning is more important, and focus on their growth is more important. It is important to nurture them and to grow. So most of us homeschoolers come from this belief. And however, there is also another opposite view to this notion of childhood, and that is the Puritan view. So, what does the Puritan view say? I'm going to just shift to the presentation. So, what do you think the Puritan way says? The Puritan view say, especially when we say that it is opposite of the romantic view. So, the Puritan view says that children are devils. They need to be tamed. We parents have the responsibility to tame them, or else they might, get into bad habits. They might fall back in their work, and they will not have a successful life. So that becomes the Puritan view of Puritan view of Puritan view of childhood. So so the basic 4 or 5 elements of this view is that children are devils, they need to be tamed. Chances of them falling into the wrong company is very high. They need strict discipline, and the focus is on threats and punishment. That you remember probably somewhere during our childhood, or a couple of generations ago, or maybe our parents faced this, is when you didn't listen, or when you didn't do something in the right way, you were, the stick was used, or you were reprimanded for it, or you were punished for it. So the consequences were in this manner. That how can you do something like this is wrong, you need to change that behavior, which is for which you have to suffer something. You either give up on something, or you maybe stand outside the classroom. Or I remember my mom used to deny me something that I really wanted. At times, out in her frustration, she used to also raise her hands, because she would feel that I need to be tamed to a great extent. And this view you also influences, if a parent has this view of childhood, their curriculum and the way they implement the curriculum is going to be governed by these beliefs, and they are going to bring in more of threats, punishment. Do your work or else you don't get this, do that or else you don't get this. But I'm sure that many of our homeschooling families have gone beyond this understanding of childhood, and we believe that no, children are way different, and you cannot tame anybody by punishing them or being strict. All that it does is it causes a lot of fear in the child, and child would do something out of fear and not because they really want it, or they really are interested in it, or their reasoning says that yes, this is wrong and I need to change my behavior. So that is what this Puritan view is about. It is very important that parents be aware of this view, and certain elements of this view can be part of every parent. It used to be part of me too before I started unschooling, where many a times, out of frustration, and because I also had OCDs, I wanted everything neat, tidy, clean. I used to get so frustrated with my children, and I would say that, okay, unless you clean the room, I'm not going to give you your meal. Where does this come from? This comes from a notion that I wanted to tame my children. I wanted them to do what is right, which was decided by me. And I've used threats and punishments too. So that is what the Puritan view is about. And when we talk about parents evolving, we are talking about changing these beliefs, that are there inside us. And that is where a lot of inner work is required. That is where you need to really question, and you really need to see how your behavior is impacting your child. You need to be super observant about that. And um, and yeah, so I'm going to move on to the next approach. This navigating through the slide, because it's on a different tab, I cannot have it on the same tab as the presentation, is creating some problem. But nevertheless, so I'm going to move on to the next approach, which is the rights based approach. Now, what do you think a rights based approach would be all about? So, the rights based approach believes that children have rights. They have the right to choice, and they have the ability to make choices, right? The whole idea believes that when we all make our decisions based on the experiences that we have, the knowledge that we have, and our you know our cognitive thinking around our experience, the knowledge, and what we want to do next. So, the rights based approach believes that children, with whatever limited experiences they have an ability to decide for the needs that are there for around them at that time. So, for example, if a child is really small, say around 2 years old, or even a newborn child, the basic need of a newborn child probably would be food, warmth, and to be cleaned after he or she does potty and susu, and lastly sleep. So they are well aware of these needs. They know very well that if they are hungry, they reach out to their mom. They will immediately easily reach out to the breast of a mother for milk. They'll start crying and howling. If they want the warmth, and if they are in their crib and they start crying and they want the warmth of their mother, they start crying, and they show that they want warmth, and immediately, as soon as they are picked up, they stop crying. So even a small child is aware of their needs and has the ability to make the choice. So, even a baby knows that when they want its mother, they'll want only the mother. So, even if anybody else in the house picks them up, they don't stop crying. And as soon as the mother picks them up, they stop crying. So, they know what exactly they want, right? So, the rights based approach basically believes in this. It believes that children and have rights. They have the right to play. They have the right uh, to learn the way they want to. They have the right to make choices. The rights based approach also believes that every child is unique and different. And the most important thing is that responsibility, discipline develops automatically when the child experiences freedom. Now, when we look at this view is more around the unschooling way of doing things. Okay, because unschooling is not only about not bringing in any academics in the life of the child, and saying that, oh, we are not going to do any academics, we're just going to go by what the child wants to learn. It's not only limited to that, but it is much larger. It is about respecting a child's decision or choice about everything around their needs. So, need to eat, need to be clean, need to wear the clothes that they wear, need to decide when they want to sleep, when they are tired. So everything, it is believed that the child has a right to make these choices, and they know their body, they know, and this alignment is there when they are born. And as they grow, somewhere there is a misalignment, and this misalignment is caused because of unnecessary expectations, or expectations of, may not be unnecessary also, but expectations from the outside world. Like when you're living in a family setting, there will be certain ways in which a family does things. However, if it infringes too much on what the child wants, and creates a blockage in letting the child decide what they want to do and how they want to do things, it creates a misbalance. And once this balance is back in the child's life, they gear up to not only being responsible, the responsibility automatically comes, and they also become disciplined by themselves, because now they are focused on doing things that they really want to. So they will put in their efforts. So, in fact, we follow the unschooling way, probably, which is why I'm talking so much about it. And I have seen a lot of change in my behavior as well as my children's behavior. So, the schooling way says that a child of 4, 5, 6 years of age can have a 10-minute attention span. However, I have seen my daughter sit for hours doing something that she's interested in, and with a lot of attention, care. And because she values what she is doing, I also see her cleaning up on her own afterwards. There are times when I tell her to do something, she'll just do it and run away. She'll not feel that she's responsible towards cleaning, or she's responsible towards keeping everything properly. She'll say, Mama, you asked me to do this, I've done, I'm going. However, when it is her choice and something that she wants to do, everything is impeccable. Everything is done well. She's using her creativity. In fact, nowadays, she often tells me, whenever we sit to do anything craft, she said, I want to use my idea. You can sit next to me and use your own idea or whatever you want to do, but I'm going to do it my way. And I enjoy and thrive in the fact that she knows her way, and very often she comes out with really unique and wonderful things. There are times when she spoils things also, like there are times when she creates a lot. Her ideas don't come out in the reality the way she has imagined, but that also is learning, because then that's where we have conversations around, okay, let's think about or talk about what was your idea exactly, and what happened along the way, what could have been done differently. And those conversations are so important that they help them grow. So, with this, I have just shared three major important notions of childhood, which also talk about, which also progress into understanding who is a child, and where I come up with this debate again, whether a child is a socially constructed phenomena or is it natural. So now there has been a lot of research also in this, and they have found that in the olden days, there was some research done by a person called Philip Aries, who found that in the olden days, the clothes that children wore were, similar to what the adults wore. And when Phillips kind of researched and observed and went into depth with the paintings of those era, she found that most often children were not considered as something different. They were actually considered as miniature adults. They would accompany their parents, they would do whatever they could, and they would stay away from whatever they couldn't do, and it was an accepted fact that okay, this happens. And so there was not too much attention given to childhood as a different phenomena, and as the child grew, they very easily got initiated in the same skill or vocation that the parent followed. It was only, what is said is that it was only during industrialization that a different view of childhood came into being. And why is that? Now, majority of parents started working, both mother and father started working in factories. They needed to have somebody to look after their children. And because these factories were located far away from the residences, see, earlier it was farming and other professions, right? So the family lived close to the workplace. So the family was also a joint family. So anybody in the house could look after the child. However, as industrialization began, families started becoming more and more nuclear. It was only husband, wife, and children who had to shift out of their original homes and start living close to where the factories were or where the industries were. And then, because the mothers and mainly the mothers started asking for leave to go and feed the children and come back to work, the factories and these industry owners took the onus on themselves to take care of the children. And that's where schooling as a standardized group kind of work came up. And at that time there were two main views. There were a lot of people who believed in the romantic view. So we also have Waldorf approach that came from that view. We have Montessori approach that came from that view. And at the same time, we had other approaches where, children were put in various classrooms. There was a strict teacher who was trying to discipline them, who was teaching them, was asking them to learn things by heart and reprimanding them for not learning. So industrialization gave rise to both these approaches in childhood. Okay. And I know this session can be a little dry. I don't see many people online right now. Hopefully it is seen later. But this is something that I would want everybody to think about, and everybody to delve deeper into, that what is my notion of childhood. Am I a romantic? Do I have a romantic view, or do I have a Puritan view, or do I have a child rights-based approach? And in case you have the rights-based approach or the romantic view, it would be easy for you to adapt a curriculum accordingly. It'll be easier, and it'll be a lot more fun when you adopt a curriculum that very much is in line with your approach to childhood. So in fact, even when homeschooling parents, go looking for curriculums outside or online schools outside, I would say delve deeper into understanding what is the approach of the school. How are they teaching the children? How do they treat the children? How are they what is their view about assessment, what is their view about competition, what is their understanding about what if a child doesn't learn something at the same pace with other children, how do they approach it, what do they do if that happens, what do they do if the child doesn't want to learn what is being planned by the teacher, what is their approach in that case. And those asking those questions is very important to ensure that even if you choose a standardized program for your child is learning and is happily learning, is doing what or the child wants to do and learning the way they want to. They're happy in that atmosphere. So, also with that, I would like to talk about two basic, uh, two main important theories about how children learn, because that is also something that will impact on the curriculum you design. Following this session, in the next session, we will go a lot into content and we'll look at how to design content for primary age children and then for secondary. I do feel that, by the time children are 10 and 11, they are ready for doing independent work and they can independently learn. They can also, even if they're following books or a particular curriculum, they can independently learn. And whenever they need help, they can seek help. So once, but that can happen only if their foundation is very strong. That can happen if this foundation is strong and we put in a lot of efforts as homeschooling parents or even unschooling parents to build that foundation in them. Unschooling has a very different way of doing it. However, it still happens. Children still know all the concepts that they are interested in, and whatever they know is usually plus or minus aligned to what other homeschooling parents are doing. It's no way different because curiosity is the same. Children are curious about all these concepts that are taught in the primary school. And so somewhere or the other, those that curiosity comes out and children learn about it during the course of their time, say up to, from 0 to 10 years old. Somewhere or the other, they acquire the basic knowledge that they need about that particular concept. So so let's look into learning theories. If you guys have any comments or if you all have any questions, please do put them down. Though I yet see not many people online, I'm hoping that people view this video later on. So I'm going to now share about um, uh, two main learning theories. So, the first one that I'm going to talk about is the conditioning theory. What do we mean by the word conditioned? When are you conditioned? You're conditioned when you do something over and over again, and now you know that if this happens, then you are going to behave in this way. Or this happens, then you are going to behave in this way. So conditioning theory of learning is that there is a cause and an effect kind of a relationship. So if this happens, then this. If that happens, then this. We'll go a little more in detail by understanding three different types of conditioning. So the three different types of conditioning. One is classical conditioning, where you learn to respond to something in you know even if there is another stimulus that's coming in. Like there were a lot of experiments conducted for classical conditioning where a dog, food was kept in front of the dog, and at the same time a bell rang, and then the food, the dog got tamed in such a way that every time the bell rang, the dog used to wait for food. So the dog started associating the bell ringing to food coming. And that's what even happens in many cases at home. If you try and think about your child or even yourself, sometimes you're so conditioned to know that at a particular time the bell rings, you know that it's the milkman. Or if it's at a particular other time, you say that, oh, I know she was going to come, it's going to be that person. So this is about bell ringing, but this can be translated into many other things. Like, I know that my children know that Sundays we cook something special, or so they are expecting it. So they are conditioned to expect that. Now, this conditioning can also go deep in understanding behaviors. Now, behaviors that are related to what happens at school, or related to how you react to a child. So for example, mm, like, say if my children know that I get angry, when I get angry, I generally become very quiet, so they associate my quietness to my anger. So, and then they come and ask me, Mama, what's wrong, why are you angry, and even if so they're conditioned to believe that when I am quiet and I am angry at the same time. So, oh, see this, an automatic conditioned response is spread with this stimulus. Probably sometime I have been like that, and they have got it. They have learned this behavior. Okay, they have been conditioned to this behavior. The other thing is about operant conditioning, where children learn, or anybody, any individual for that matter, is learning through positive reinforcement or positive punishment, negative reinforcement or negative punishments. You know, so anything either, so there is either a threat or a reward, and you learn through that. So, like, for example, if a child is conditioned to believe that if I don't do my homework, my mom is going to get angry. So that is a negative reinforcement on the child. So I better do my homework so that my mom doesn't get angry. And the need to please a mom or a parent is very high in a particular child. Then he would get influenced by this negative reinforcement. Or it could be positive reinforcement also, like every time I complete my homework on time, or if I read a book without making mistakes, my mom gives me a chocolate. So now the chocolate is a uh, positive reinforcement, right? So now, if you look at this kind of conditioning, then you start questioning yourself as to what is it that the child is learning. Is the motivation internal, or is it external? Is the child doing something or behaving in a particular way because he believes, or he or she believes, that that is the right way, or is it because I'm giving him a chocolate at the end? And it's happened to me too. There were many a times before we started unschooling, that my children used to come and ask me, so what are you going to give me? Why should I do this for you? What will I get? So, or else they would expect something in return all the time. They would expect me to make it could be like, have a special baking session at home because they have been extremely good, or it could be anything, it could be mama bringing in chocolates, or mama bringing in gifts because they have behaved well. And that used to, get me into a state of reflection. In fact, when we were in our deschooling process, that is what I reflected a lot on. Why do I want my child to follow something or to do something? Is it because they are getting something in return, or is it because they feel it is important? And that is also why we got into the unschooling way of doing things, where I had to give up my ego. I had to give up all my previous ways of doing things, or parenting my children, and adopt new ways. So this deschooling process was also chaotic, it was confusing, it was tiring. And however, at the it you keep making mistakes, and one fine day it just comes to you, and transformation starts happening. But it is a long drawn process, and it takes a lot of inner work. Now, the third way in which children learn, or any adult or any individual as such learns, is through observation, right? We are constantly observing what is happening around us, and we learn from there. That. So, when it is said that the parents should become the role model and the parents should practice what, or parents or adults or teachers should practice what they preach, they are heavily relying on the observational learning. So when you see a parent behaving or doing things in a certain way and you see the positive impact of it, you automatically adopt it as your behavior and you start replicating it. And this could be in terms of anything, like, if a parent wants to inculcate waking up early in the child, so the parent himself or herself will wake up early, and the process will go on. And when the child sees that, yes, I'm observing and I'm seeing how it changes the way my parent is at home, then they try to do the same. So, observational learning, there could be many examples that could be shared on observational learning. So, this was just one that just came off into my mind right now. So, what we have looked at is the conditioning way of learning. Now, why should we parents know about this approach? Okay, so when you design a curriculum and when you are uh, designing how you want to implement the curriculum and what all you want to do to create that environment in which the child learns, all this will come into play, right? So if you which is why it is important to know these two basic theories and to be aware of them in your life. Again, I say that it's not right or wrong. Conditioning is part of everybody's life. It is part of my life. It is part of everybody's life, because we are constantly observing. We are constantly, we love praise. We love appreciation. At the same time, we fear punishments. We fear a negative consequence. May it be natural or may it be unnatural. Well, so we and that is how many of our perspectives, our behaviors are shaped, right? To give you a very strong example of operant conditioning in these days of pandemic is how some people haven't stepped out of their house because they are in constant fear. The fear of the consequence that if they step out, they will uh, get COVID positive, and that would cause a lot of inconvenience in the family. And we don't know what other things it would cause. So we have operant conditioning, we have classical conditioning, we have observational learning everywhere around us, and that is a fact. The other theory of learning, which I would like everybody to know, is the constructivism theory. Now, what does the constructivism theory say? So, the constructivism theory says that knowledge is constructed, and every child or every adult for that matter constructs their own knowledge. Okay, and all that we can do as adult facilitators is to create that environment so that the child can construct their own knowledge. That is, they can make meaning of things that are around them. So for very young children, learning through senses is important, where they taste, they touch, they feel, they hear, they see. All these sensory learning is very important. And as they grow out of sensory learning, you will also see that concrete experiences are important for children, which is why we see a lot of children engage in pretend play, and then they start associating. So you associate two things together, maybe, and see the similarities and differences is in certain things, and at the same time are you are learning about that concept. Like, say for example, we all know plants, but we all know and categorize all plants as one group, plants. However, we know that everything is different. There are bushes, there are shrubs, there are this, even the shape of leaves are different. So yet we are able to concrete, we can associate things and generalize and put them together in groups and learn. But that can happen when we have had enough time to use our sensory senses to learn things, senses of touch, taste, seeing things, observing things happening, and listening, everything together. And then it moves on to abstract. By the time a child is 15, 16, or even I think in these days 12, 13, they do a lot of abstract level work. They are able to understand abstract concepts. And so, however, understanding of these abstract concepts becomes easy if they have had enough sensory learning in their early childhood days. Okay. Now what happens when you get all a lot of information through your senses and through experiments, demonstration, through listening to an adult talk or listening to peers talk? There is an internal assimilation that goes on. What do we mean by internal assimilation? Where you are trying to put two and two together and make connections with what you have heard, what you already know, through what you have experienced earlier. You're trying to put things together to make meaning. And that internal assimilation is what constructs knowledge in the child. So, any amount of books that you give, any amount of teaching you do, unless the child makes sense of what is being taught, is not going to learn. Until then, it is going to be probably just memorization and and repeating whatever they have heard, but maybe the understanding is not there. And constructivism theory also, there are different theorists in constructivism. Piaget, Vygotsky. Vygotsky heavily depended and said that involvement of adults and peers in the life of children are important to help them make sense of the world around them. So it is the conversations that happen between the adult and the peers is what enables learning. And these conversations are very important. And which is where I say that if a child comes with a question or with a puzzled look and wants to know more about something, if a parent just shuns them away saying that, go find out by yourself, don't disturb me, or just gives any answer which doesn't make sense to the child, then it doesn't help in the learning of the child. Which is where, and even if a parent doesn't know much about that subject, telling the child that, let's research more, let's try and understand this more together, that also helps, because now the child knows that, okay, my mom is trying to help me make sense. It's okay, and it's okay if she doesn't know. She's not supposed to know everything. Now the Puritan view would say that the parent or the teacher knows everything. And so, use of authority is a lot more in the Puritan view. The authority becomes more loving in the romantic view. And in the rights based approach, there is no authority. Parents and children regard each other as partners. They look at each other as partners from where each other can learn. Even the parent learns from the child, at the same time, the child is also learning from the parent. So, yes, with this, I finish saying what I wanted to say. I wanted to do this session because it's very important for a parent to understand at least a little bit about these theories and reflect on what is their notion of childhood, because that is going to have a huge impact on how they implement their curriculum. You can, and for curriculums, you can pick up any books. You can pick up an NCRT book or an IB board book, uh, or a private publication for that matter, or go, or any book that Exceed, or any other book you can pick up as your guide. However, what you do with the book is very important. If you just blindly follow the exercises and experiments in that book without thinking about how your child is, and how is it that your child, how is my child going to learn all this, without thought around this, you will, it will become a very tiring process for you. As it is, as homeschoolers, we are not only playing the role of a parent, we become the facilitator, we are the home managers, we are trying to keep everything in order in the house, plus we have other responsibilities. If we have a job, we have to take care of the earning aspect of our family. So we already have a lot of burden on ourselves. There's so much on our plate, and when we take on an additional role of facilitating the learning of our child, it is much advisable to put in some time to understand these things about yourself, and then and work on it. It also happens along the way, because the more you research, the more you read, the more you get into understanding different elements of learning, of parenting, of child development, the more and more you get acquainted with the recent studies, recently generated theories, the more exciting your journey is going to be. So, yeah, so with that, I'm going to end my session today. I don't see any questions, I don't see any comments. We still have about 9 minutes. If anyone has any questions or comments, please start typing in, or else I'm going to consider this session uh, as over, and I can always take your questions and comments later on. Not a problem. Uh, Okay, I've been waiting, but I don't see. Okay, so there's one question that's come up. Um, how would you bring about time management in kids while homeschooling? Okay, once again, this depends upon your notion of childhood and your understanding of learning theories and how you would want your child to learn. Okay, so if you are of the romantic view, you would probably create a rhythm along with your child. And the Waldorf approach shows a beautiful way of bringing in rhythm. So does the Montessori method. And or else, if you want to adapt your own rhythm, you would create a rhythm along with your child, where you are the loving authority, and and the child will automatically go by what you want to say, because they, in return, they are getting a lot of positive reinforcement. So you can, if you are of the romantic view, you would do that. If you are of the Puritan view, you would create a timetable and stand with a stick saying you better do what is planned. And if you are uh, heavily into unschooling, you would not enforce or not even think of creating a timetable for the child. You would do your things your way and give the child the freedom to do their things their way. In fact, in unschooling, they also ask, the question that a parent also asks at some point is, when I say I give my child the freedom, don't I keep the authority with myself, and I yet in a position of authority. And then a lot of delving and inner work happens in that area. Okay, thank you, Lily. A beautiful comment. Beautiful explained the importance of the right motivation behind teaching our children that play more importance than the actual curriculum. Thank you, Lily. There's another comment. This was really useful for those who want to start homeschooling. I think this is the base, this is the base which helps you. And I once again want you to remember that homeschooling is very unique to every family. It is not that, there is one particular right answer to how you homeschool. One has to understand the circumstances, the environment at home, also the nature and beliefs of every member of the family, and respect that. It is quite challenging, but if in a house, if you're living in a joint family, or you have your grandparents living with you, and if you have a particular approach, say for example, I have the unschooling approach, but my mother believes in the romantic way of doing things. How do you bring in that balance so that there's no friction, or there's less friction? Or if you have friction, how do you deal with it so that it doesn't create a negative aura around you? And these things are important for a parent to also get into when they are thinking about out designing a homeschooling curriculum, because it's not only about teaching your child something. It is a way of life. It is a way in which how you bring together, you know everybody in the family, whether they all might have different ways of doing things, different beliefs, yet how do you create a cohesive whole which helps your child, which helps in the growth of your child, where the child learns that it is, to accept, to respect, to be open minded, and so on. So, and that, homeschooling families have a great opportunity to do that in their household, because they are all together. I would always say that the parent is not solely responsible for the education and learning of their child, especially in a homeschooling environment. Everybody around them is your neighbors, your friends, your family. Involvement of everybody in whatever way possible is very crucial. So, to give you an example for this, my daughter learns a lot from my neighbors. She spends a lot of time with them, and they have their own ways of living and doing things. And we appreciate that. We do not say that, no, no, this is not our way of doing things, so we are not going to associate too much with y'all. We accept the way they are. So, that's something that I would like to share with all homeschooling parents, that it is it's it is in our hands to make the whole experience enjoyable, and to deal with all the concerns and challenges with an open mind. It's very important that we do that. Otherwise, it causes more harm to our child than anything else. And then I always tell parents, if there's too much chaos in your child is better off at a school. Just be careful when you're choosing a school for your child, and just don't put him in any school, where and ensure that the child is happy in the school. So there are phases also when parents go through difficult phases, when somebody passes away, or there is a financial crunch, or there could be any other crisis in the family. In such cases, one way is to involve the child and make the in that entire crisis, and look at him as an equal partner. Or if you're of the romantic approach and you want to keep all the troubles away from the child, you you either see, but that might become very pressurizing on you as a family. But you can try and keep the child away, involved in many other activities, so that he's less exposed to the challenges in the family. So there's so many things that we can discuss around all this. However, today I think I'm going to end my session here. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this session. If you do have questions around this, if you want to know, get a list of books that you would like to read. In fact, I don't think I've read any particular books. They are very heavy psychology books around all these topics. However, there are many articles. If you just Google, you'll get information on constructivism, on classical conditioning, on various notions of childhood. You can just type in notions of childhood on Google, and you'll get a whole list of articles there. So, but do read, do keep researching, and because it's an designing and implementing a curriculum is an ever evolving process. In fact, which is what we probably will take in the next class, not the next, maybe 2 or 3 sessions later. Next session, I'm going to look at parenting styles. So, your understanding of children and childhood is going to impact and your parenting style and what you believe uh, that a parent's role is. That is going to heavily impact also on how your curriculum is implemented. So, in the next session, we will look at parenting styles, and in that I will recommend a book because I found a beautiful book which talks about parenting styles. And I would also thank another member who got me interested in parenting style. She's a member of our Homeschooling India group itself, Pallavi Behera. We did parenting styles as an activity in one of my parenting circles, and it was a beautiful way of reflecting on how your parenting style is affecting your child. So I'll talk a little about parenting styles in the next session. Thank you so much for being here. And with that, I end my broadcast and see you next Thursday. Thank you.